the Upco Studios in Oklahoma City. You're watching the Press Row. I'm Jenny Carlson here with Barry Trammell. Time for our inbox segment. Your email questions, our answers. Barry, I'm not sure Bob Stoops is going to be watching this episode of the Inbox. It's all about his team falling off the cliff. Let's get right to it. This one comes from Jim. Jim says, maybe Bob Stoops should bring back Mark Mangino to coach the offensive line. What do you think about that, Barry?
Well, I think it's a great idea. I love Mark Mangino. Now, let me say this. I think James Patton gets a bad rep. I don't think the offensive line's been a huge problem at OU. Massive injuries this year. They had to revamp, and still I thought the offensive line did a solid job. They ran the ball as effectively this year as they have in several years. They protected Landry Jones pretty well. I don't think the O-line was the problem at Oklahoma this year or the year before.
Yeah, I think that's a spot where you don't upset the apple cart. You know, there are some other areas where you might say Oklahoma needs to make some changes. Bob Stoops hasn't done that a lot. Last year was really the first time we saw him fire a guy, first time we saw him demote a guy on his staff to make changes on the defensive side of the ball. But offensive line to me is one area where things are going okay. I mean, yes, injuries are a concern, but that's not a coaching thing. That's just luck, bad luck. So I don't think you mess with James Patton in the offensive line right now. All right, this one comes from Jerry in the inbox. Jerry says, does Mike Stoops still have it as the defensive coordinator? I don't know what it is, but I assume he means that it factor. Does he still have that, or does he have something else?
I think it means, does he still have the 2000, 2001, 2002, 3, 4 type of success in him? And the question is, we don't know. Since the explosion of the spread offenses, Mike Stoops has not produced big-time defenses. I mean, his defense has struggled at Arizona in the Pac-12. Of course, they didn't have the talent level that he was accustomed to. But year one back with the Sooners, and the Sooners got lit up as much as they did a year ago. And frankly, the quarterbacking and offenses that they ran into last season were better than what they got this year. I mean, Clint Shelf did it to Oklahoma this year. I mean, Brandon Whedon, you could sort of understand. Nick Florence lit up the Sooners a little bit. He's not Robert Griffin. So I think the jury is out on Mike Stoops.
I think so, too. People thought he'd come back and it'd be automatic. And I think there were improvements. I think that Oklahoma was, in a lot of ways, more prepared, more settled defensively. And yet we saw some weirdness, honestly. We saw, those games with no linebackers, one linebacker, times when you thought, they should maybe stick to a more base defense. Instead, they went with sort of, little kitschy differences, and it didn't really work. You saw the whole defense get caught flat-footed at West Virginia. But you know what's interesting, Barry? A few tenths of a point difference, and Oklahoma could have been playing LSU or Louisville in a bowl game, offenses that aren't nobody has Johnny Manziel. And suddenly things look a lot different. We're not talking about any of this stuff, probably.
If OU goes to Sugar Bowl and beats Florida, which I think they would have, you'd be 11-2, and everybody'd be talking about how great everything is.
Instead, we go back to the inbox and Isaiah with another Oklahoma falling off the cliff question. Do you imagine drastic changes being made by OU and the coaching staff this offseason? It's pretty clear after 4 seasons, after a championship game appearance, OU is not an elite team or program. What do you think?
Well, it depends on what you mean by the drastic, and I also disagree with the elite program thing.
I think they're an elite program, but elite team they did not have.
They were not an elite team this year.
Yeah.
However, drastic changes, depends on what you mean by drastic. They're changing the offense. Is that drastic enough for you? It's pretty clear they're going to a more mobile quarterback, a dual threat type of deal. Any staff changes? I don't know. I would guess yes. Does that qualify as drastic? Change out one coach? Change out offensive style? I would say that's pretty drastic. So I think the answer is yes.
Well, drastic for Oklahoma because, as I mentioned, until last year, we hadn't really seen any sort of forced changes on a staff. They'd obviously had guys leave, wanted to take a head coaching job or an offensive coordinator spot, defense coordinator spot, whatever the case may be, but they hadn't really forced anybody out. So if anybody else gets forced out, to me, that's fairly drastic because that's not something Bob Stoops does. But you got to think there's going to be something. There's going to be some movement, whether that's within the staff, moving guys out. I don't know where it comes, but you got to think there's going to be some changes, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I don't think they're going to change offensively, but I think defensively we could see some guys moving around. All right, lastly from the inbox, this one comes from Brooks. Brooks says, are the Sooners finding their own Johnny Football to be the answer? Maybe I'm a contrarian, but I'm trying to find another solution. Would it be easier to absolutely commit to a more physical offensive lineman and a ground and pound running game? Well, first of all, Barry, there's Is there another Johnny Manziel to be found?
Well, I haven't seen one,
Yeah.
but however, the answer is no, it would not be easier to go complete change of philosophy. Let's remember first, Johnny Manziel didn't do this just to the Sooners. I mean, he made Alabama look bad. He got Alabama down 21-0 or whatever it was, beat the Crimson Tide 29-24. We saw what Alabama does to ground and pound running games. If you're trying to catch Alabama, I don't think you mimic Alabama. I think you counter Alabama. Of course, Oklahoma really catching Alabama is not their primary concern. Now, getting back on top of the Big 12 and just getting into the national title conversation is their goal. Worry about Alabama when you run into Alabama. But I think clearly the spread offense with a mobile quarterback is a great way to go. Spread offense without a mobile quarterback is a great way to go. Everybody's going to the spread. The NFL's embracing the spread. No reason for the Sooners to go the opposite direction.
To me, it's just this addition of the mobile quarterback, having a dual threat guy who's able to run that spread. To me, that's just the next evolution of this. I don't know where we're going to be in another 5 to 10 years. Maybe we'll have circled back around to something that does, resemble more of a ground and pound running game. But right now, the spread, zone reads, those sorts of things that get thrown in there, I think that's the way we're going. And if you look at it, it looks like Oklahoma has guys to do that, and I think they're going to. I mean, that's all signs. You've got Blake Bell, you've got some other guys on campus who can do a more Johnny Manziel type of job. I think they're going to go that way. You're not going to see the pocket passer, at least not in the immediate future that we've seen in the past. I think it's going to be fun to see exactly how that goes at Oklahoma. We've seen it do well elsewhere. We'll see how it goes down there. Hey, be sure to stay with the best coverage team anywhere at newsok.com and every day in the Oklahoman.